Good day, everybody. My name is Thayer Long, and I am president of the Association for Print Technologies, and I'm going to be the moderator today for our program around vote by mail or ballot mail. So we know that vote by mail or ballot mail has received a lot of attention and a lot of interest lately, given the fact that we're in a presidential election year. And with the social and physical distancing requirements in place, states and localities are wrestling with and trying to figure out how to properly run a safe and secure election while also keeping our citizens healthy. So ballot mail is highly specialized, and there are many companies who are already very capable and very proficient in this segment. But because of the anticipated demand that we expect to see an increase around, certainly over the next coming weeks and months, we know it's going to require new companies to enter into this segment in order to help meet the anticipated demand. So over the past couple of weeks, the Association for Print Technologies has engaged a range of stakeholders, including election officials, technology providers, policymakers, and print and mailing service providers, in order to help fashion a coordinated industry response to help educate and inform mail service providers about the ballot mail segment. And so what we have found and what we believe to be true is that mail service providers who are already capable of processing and printing and mailing and inserting mail using high integrity methods such as reading and matching barcodes or printing variable envelopes using mail run data files are going to be the best equipped in order to convert their operations in order to meet any real demand surge for ballot mail. So this program today is intended to give that segment, to give you and the industry a sort of 101 overview of the specialization and the expertise it takes to handle a ballot mail operation. We hope that it's going to answer some questions. We hope it's going to spur some additional questions. And we also hope that it's going to demystify some concerns about ballot mail. And then, of course, also introduce you to subject matter experts in the field. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our opening speaker, our keynote speaker, if you will. Amber McReynolds is the CEO of an organization called Vote at Home. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's devoted exclusively to looking at the election process and balloting process for citizens and doing it in a different way other than going to a polling center, a live polling station. And so they are very well equipped on ballot mail. They have a great interface and exchange with election officials and with industry. Amber herself is a passionate advocate for our election system and has experience running elections. She served as the Denver, Colorado's director of elections for many years and helped oversee and institute their ballot mail program. So as I said, she's an industry expert and right now a very busy individual. So we're very pleased that she was able to join us today. Amber, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Thayer. Well, it's great to see you all virtually today, and really appreciative that so many partners in the industry have joined this call. First, I would start by saying, as many of you have seen, the increase in the use of vote by mail is increasing by the day, and as we're thinking about not only policy changes, we're also contemplating implementation and what that looks like for states. And up to this point in presidential cycles, there's been less than 30% of voters across the country that have traditionally voted either by absentee or by mail in the traditional sense. But there's also states, mostly in the western side of the country, all in the western side of the country, that this is actually the dominant method of voting. And so what we're trying to do at the National Vote at Home Institute is help states prepare, get ready for this this surge that we're now seeing across the country in advance of the election. And part of that includes partnerships with the industry that will be able to help them not only process ballots on the back end, but make sure that the outbound process works well, it's done right, and voters are successful at getting their ballots mailed to them and then successfully able to return them. And you all are critical in making sure that can happen. And so, you know, what I've been encouraging is it's sort of all of community, all of a response that's necessary in this type of environment right now, because election officials are seeing a significant increase in the use of vote by mail. Many of them don't use third-party vendors right now to mail out their ballots. They do it manually. We saw a lot of that, for instance, in the state of Wisconsin recently, where they went from 120,000 absentee requests to 1.4 million within the span of about 3 to 4 weeks. And they essentially, all the localities were manually sending out those ballots and not using third parties that potentially could help them. So there's significant growth. And just to give a couple of other quick examples of that, the state of Georgia traditionally has less than 100,000 or so in their primary that they're running now, and they're already over 1 million ballot requests out. They are using a vendor to do that statewide. Rhode Island is in the middle of talks on expanding their mechanisms. Just in the state of Iowa, I saw one report yesterday from a local election official that I think up to this point in previous election cycles had seen less than 1,000 vote by mail requests, and there are over 17,000 as of today. So this is just an exponential increase, and I'm predicting that at least more than half of the country will vote by mail in November. It could be upwards of 70%, which would be a complete reversal from last time, which was about 70% voting in person. And so we need to make sure that election officials have options and are supported from certainly the vendor and what I like to call partner community to get this right and help alleviate, frankly, some of the stress and the pain points that they've experienced up to this point with their manual processes. So I'm really grateful for the conversation today. Happy to answer questions and be certainly the National Vote at Home Institute can serve as a resource to many of you. We have a ton of research, data, all of that on our website. I think also it's important for the vendor community to leverage expertise of civic design organizations. We've got a whole webinar series where we did worked with the Center for Civic Design and CTCL to even recommend envelope changes, instructional changes, all of those things. So you all to leverage those best practices is really critical to as you provide service to these election officials across the country. So with that, I thank you all again for your work and your support, frankly, to the huge election community that is across the country that's trying desperately to scale up their operations quickly and really will rely on professional advice from the community as you all are on today. So thanks, Thayer, for having me, and again, appreciate being here and look forward to it. Thanks.
Amber, it's our pleasure, and I know you're going to have to leave, jump off a little early. I wanted to kind of pull out a couple of things that you just said. So, you know, your prediction that half the country is going to vote by mail conceivably this year. So we're talking what, 100 million ballots? Is that the number that we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be well over that. I mean, traditionally it's usually 30% or less vote absentee, and that's just collective across the country. Obviously, the Western states have a much different percentage comparatively. But, you know, just looking at, say, you look at an Arizona or Montana, they're both close to 80% of voters asking for their ballots to be mailed to them. California just announced Friday that they're going to mail a ballot to every elector in the state across all counties. So seeing decisions like that, you know, happening right now, and frankly, voters are asking for it. It's sort of not even, I've been saying it's not really up to policymakers. It's not really up to election officials. Voters are opting themselves in at record numbers. We're seeing that in Florida, we're seeing that in Georgia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan. Michigan just had a local election last week across various jurisdictions, and 98% of voters voted by mail. And those statistics are staggering when you compare previous elections. Nebraska is holding an election today that most of the voters have already cast a ballot by mail, and they requested that to do that. So voters are pushing this, and they're going to want it. And I think it could go well over 50%. I think 50% is probably a conservative estimate. I think it could be more like 70%, which would be a complete reversal from 2016 when over 70% of the country actually voted in person.
Wow. So there's a couple questions, and I'm going to get to them. Actually, there's a couple questions that I think are going to be better suited to maybe work up for the other speakers. But I didn't want to leave you without kind of putting your election official hat on here, because you were an election official. If what you're saying is going to come true, that we could potentially either be a 50-50 or a 70-30 split. What's going on right now in the minds of election officials, and from an industry standpoint, what should we expect as we engage with those offices? Because I would imagine that there's a learning curve for them as well. So how can we, what should our industry expect as we're kind of doing outreach to those local offices, and kind of what's kind of the temperature? If you could kind of give us a little bit of a situational awareness, that would be helpful.
Sure. I mean, I would say that, when you think about it, there are 5 states now, 6 with California, that mail a ballot to every elector. And then there's 2 others where the majority of the electors get their ballot by mail. So technically 8 states that have a lot of experience dealing with high volumes. And you think about that, that's 42 states that are left in that mix where they've had this being the method that isn't the dominant method of voting. And so there is a steep learning curve. And I think that what I would just recommend to you all is, be their partner more than anything. They need, and we're doing a lot of this at the National Vote at Home Institute, putting out standards and recommendations and sort of how they can think about this. But I think it's incumbent upon all of you to also be thinking in that way, that you're not only printing and mailing the ballots, but you're also helping them with a process that is likely very new to them across the board. And so, whether it be postal regulations, which I know Dan is going to talk about, whether it be kind of that coordination with the post office, they might need help with that. That might not be something that they've done before. They might not be aware of the high volume rates, for instance, that they could potentially get with their mail ballots. They might not be aware of some of the standards that exist for election mail in terms of the logo, and just some of those things that might not be something that they've had to deal with in a big way before. And so, right. Be a partner to them, offer them solutions, and frankly, I think it's incumbent also on you all as partners to adopt best practices as well. For instance, intelligent mail barcode on envelopes. That is a critical factor in making sure that there's accountability, that we know where the ballots are in the process. There's things like ballot tracking solutions that now exist. Like, that should be part of offering solutions to these election officials so they can do it well and they can get it right. And it's really offering that entire package. It's also even, adopting, for instance, from the Center for Civic Design, they've got a number of resources on their website in terms of how to design envelopes so that it's clear for the voters. I think you as partners should absolutely be making those sorts of recommendations as you engage with election officials, as you help them with their program, adopting those best practices that, number one, we're recommending, but also that other organizations are recommending, makes election officials be that much more successful. So I think we should be looking at it as, how can we make the election officials successful? And therefore, by extension, how do we make it successful for voters across the country to engage in this process, be confident in the process, and make sure that voters can vote in a safe, secure, and accessible way now and in November. And time is of the essence. I think that's the one thing I would say here too, is there's significant urgency around this. We have about 150 days or less now before military ballots start to go out for November. So we're talking about upcoming primaries, but really, there's a very short window of time before the election kicks off in November, and time is of the essence right now.
Right. Amber, last question, because I think this will be a question that also might come up, but you could be best equipped to answer it. There's 3,000 plus counties across the country, each with its own way of doing things. Has, one of the challenges might be trying to figure out to do one thing 3,000 different ways. Has there ever been any talk at this point to try to create some simplification or some standardization around the ballot process, or is that a question for another day and another election cycle?
No, it's actually a really good question there. And one of the things that we have actually recommended, we have a vote at home scale plan on our website. So our website is voteathome.org. I would encourage you all to take a look at that scale plan, because one of the things that we've specifically recommended, and part of the reason we've done this is because time is of the essence. Economies of scale matter with a lot of this, as you all know. You can get better rates when you bulk mail and high pre-sort, all those things. So one of the things we recommended is for states to actually think about centralizing some of this. So for instance, Georgia took our recommendation to get a vendor to support their upcoming primaries statewide. So they contracted with one vendor that is mailing out the ballots for all the counties. So they have 159 counties. So instead of that vendor having to work with 159 counties, they're working with the state office to get the data. The envelopes are all the same. The instructions are all the same. So that's why I think it's so critical that happened, because then it's a more streamlined process for the vendor to support, and all the voters in the entire state are getting the same packet, the same information. It's easier to communicate statewide, whether it be at the earned media level or at the Secretary of State's level, where they can basically show that consistency. And so that's one of the things that we've specifically recommended. Rhode Island is planning, and they've done that for a long period of time. They mail out the ballots from the state level. Massachusetts is considering something like that right now. Maryland is already doing that with their upcoming primaries. So those are some of the recommendations we've had. And that's certainly being discussed in a lot of other states right now too. And that could be something that, you go to, given how many counties there are, as you mentioned, and there's actually more election offices than that, because in a state like Michigan or Wisconsin, the elections are actually run at the township level.
Oh yeah,
So there's 1,500 of them in Michigan alone. That's one of the things that we've been recommending is whether it's a statewide kind of centralized process, or maybe it's even a group of counties that come together and all contract with one vendor to mail out that in a bulk way. So there's a real opportunity to think about that, especially as we see it streamlining it potentially, and it does save some costs around that, and then makes it easier, especially for vendors to deal with sort of one entity, if you will.
Fantastic. Well, Amber, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I know you'll be hanging out for a little bit more, but we appreciate your leadership on this. And what's your website again, so everyone knows how to get there?
Sure, it's voteathome.org. And yeah, I would encourage you all to take a look. We have a ton of resources in a reference library, just with best practices and things like that, and certainly many things that are applicable to the vendor community. And we know that, look, to make sure this is successful, it is going to take not only the election officials making it happen, but the vendors and the partners that support them in this process is critical to making sure that every American can vote in a safe, secure, accessible way.
Great. Thanks so much, Amber.
Sure.
So now we're getting to the segment of the program where we're going to be talking to some subject matter experts that are really going to walk through the end-to-end solution that's available for ballot mail. And we've got a great team with us today. We've got Rick Becerra and Laurie Swetlin from Blue Crest, and we've got Brooke Spalding from W&D, who are going to really go over some more of the nuts and bolts, I think, around really what it takes to execute ballot mail from both the outbound perspective as well as the inbound perspective. So, Rick, I think you're up. So we can see your screen and you're ready to rock and roll, man.
Super. So Thayer, AP Tech team, the fellow panelists, thank you for having Blue Crest on today. Blue Crest has been doing this for over 16 years now, and we've been working with state and county election officials for some time. It's been 16 years since we've been working on technology solutions, continuing innovation, and year-over-year investment. So I really appreciate you guys having us on. I want to make sure I get through a few high-level bullet points as we go through this to make sure that you guys are informed from a print and mailers perspective, because there's definitely opportunity, you know, hinging on what Amber said, right? The election services that are currently out there can't handle the magnitude of this growth, which definitely presents an opportunity given the growth in this sector, right? And so I wanted to go through at a high level, state and county election officials are in need of our support, right? While vote by mail was a gradual adoption, this pandemic has pushed mobilization to act. And, you know, as Amber stated, the time is now. So over, you know, just a quick stat, again, just going through some of the market changes that are going on. Over 70% of Americans prefer to vote by mail. That's a stat that is up from 50% in 2018. And so, you know, for us, it's about informing and making sure that you have the appropriate information, what's going on within the state and county election community space. And some of the things to consider, right, is that the state and county election officials want to maintain election continuity and increase participation, eliminate long lines and crowds at the polls. I mean, it's all over the media in terms of what happened over in Wisconsin. You know, it took all the constituents an hour before they can go in to actually vote. And this is because of the pandemic situations and other guidelines that are in place. Improving the voter confidence with ballot tracking. You heard Amber talk about it as well. It's paramount. As we're talking to these state and election officials, it is critically important, right? If you're able to track it all the way through from print, right, to the creation of the ballot, all the way down through the outgoing sorting portion of it until the counties get the return ballots in their hands. So all of this is part of ensuring that you maintain compliance with the state and postal regulations in order to, you know, automate, streamline, and ensure that you're going to be able to reduce manual labor at the polling cost, right, at the polls. So let me see if it goes to the next slide here. I apologize. So state and county election officials have a need for the following election services and solutions. If you think about what happens in the industry, again, at a high level, you got to print out all of the ballots, you know, the inserts, the different type of collateral that needs to go inside each one of these mailings. So you have to ensure that you have an envelope and you're going to be able to insert all of this information into it, right? And then appropriately, it's important to track all that through the entire stream, ensuring that the envelope gets personalized with the right constituent information. You heard Amber talk about, you know, IMB information. There's also application identifications that need to go onto the ballot. So all of that leads into, you have a certain number of densities and you need to induct it into the United States Postal Service. Well, that's also part of, you know, sorting for postal discounts, right? So that you could mail it and enter it into the United States Postal Mail stream, and ensuring that all of the ballot and the return ballot has the appropriate information in order for you to go ahead and ensure that when the constituent signs, that you're going to have the appropriate signature, right? So some areas for print and mail service providers that you guys need to consider is, you know, wealth of information from United States Postal Service to support the standardized ballots, right? We talked a little bit about that, and Amber emphasized on that, right? That is going to be critically important, you know, as part of what is needed in the vote by mail space, right? So let me just go through a high level opportunity for new business at vote by mail volumes increase. We heard Amber talk about that. Offers capabilities of high levels of process and equipment integrity. Integrity is very key. You need to account for each one of those ballots that are being produced. The opportunity to standardize the ballot specifications, right? And we talked about that as well. Provide the highest levels of data and physical security. Now that's a known topic that's currently out in the media, but I can assure you that when we discuss this at the state and county election official level, that is one of their paramount top items. That's one of the top 3 discussions when speaking with any state or county election official. Their IT departments get involved. They want to understand the security, and we'll touch a little bit more about that in the following slides. So the other thing is making available process visible and reporting to the client, right? All of that is definitely important as consideration. And here are some high level vote by mail considerations for those interested in entering this space. From a supply chain, right? Envelope and paper is key. A lot of you guys are in that already. Equipment and software, ensuring that you have the right service provider to be able to support the technology that you have. USPS coordination, we talked about this again, mail piece design, the induction of the process, and mail piece tracking, and timing. Timing is of essence, right? Regulatory compliance, service level agreements, making sure that you're going to be able to get your entire ballots out, getting produced, and then receiving them to be able to utilize those and send them over to constituents in order for them to take the inbound portion of the processing, right? Mail ballot production and future growth, right? So outbound ballot creation, inbound ballots, tracking and reporting, additional mail volumes, right? All of this, again, is important. And we just talked about security, right? Voter registration data, signature verification is paramount. In terms of scalability, there are things that need to happen as well in terms of, do you have the right facility? Do you have the right space? Obviously, you do a lot of intake of rolls, having those go throughout the entire process, making sure that you have the right technology. And another thing for awareness is the funding that's out there. You know, as part of the CARES Act, it was provided over to the states, and that's being dispersed into counties and how that's going to be utilized. But it's also really important in terms of education, ensuring the voter confidence, sending instruction booklets, preparing the election boards, right? All of this is equally important. This is just a high-level article in terms of ensuring voter confidence. Now, this is paramount. Every time we have a discussion, it's about integrity, security, control, tracking. This is all about the importance of ensuring voter confidence. A few articles that came out in terms of, informing the public of, some situations that came about, right? So it's equally important, as Amber and Thayer indicated earlier. We need to make sure that all this information is understood. So let's talk a little bit at a high level, the end-to-end process, right? And I'm going to start over at the left-hand side, and I'm going to do a high level only because we'll end up going through this a little bit later as well to provide you some additional information. It starts at the voter file. At all of the counties, they have some level of voter registration, right? So all of that resides in a repository that they have. So the voter file goes into what's called mail preparation, the IMB, address quality, doing all of those different type of things. And then you're going to go ahead and insert for personalization, making sure that the appropriate address and information is on that item. Get it sent over into the USPS. From the USPS, it's received to the voter. From the voter, it then goes returned by the voter, inducted into the USPS. And then it's received by the counties, and the counties receive it, verify the signature, and it goes through for incoming cert and opening, right? All of that is in preparation for a later process of tabulation, right? So the overall cycle here is equally important. This is the end-to-end process, which is critical for enabling data, integrity, and tracking throughout the stream. So I'll pause there for just a minute, Thayer, before we go to the next presentation.
I think that's great, Rick. I got
Thanks,
nothing
Rick.
coming right now. I think people are absorbing this really good information.
Here we are. A little by way of introduction. I'm Brooks Spalding, part of W&D North America, and thrilled to be talking about really diving into the nuts and bolts on the inserting side. And to learn a little bit more about us, we say that we have 100 years of engineering excellence. I can prove that if you can see my logo. It's 1913. So well beyond 16 years, well beyond 100 years at this point. And W&D fits as a $100 million division underneath Barry Waymiller. Those who know us best have probably known us in the past for envelope converting, for overprinting. W&D bought Hom Industries in 2017, and we bought Burrs in 2010. So that's really when we got to be known particularly well for high-level intelligent inserting. Both on the direct mail side and on the West Coast with my colleagues on the vote by mail. We now have a fourth aspect to us, which is probably timely relative to hygiene. We have a line of high-speed surgical flat mass that can produce roughly 800 a minute on surgical mass as part of our hygiene group. But today's focus is a little bit further on, obviously, very high integrity, very precise, trackable, everything that was talked before, confidential, everything you need to be able to succeed both as a high-end direct mail, market mail printer, converter, inserter, as well as for vote by mail. So similar to Blue Crest, it's been an amazing year if you're in the inserting business. A lot of machines have been sold and capacity does remain exceptionally tight as you head up to the general election. But be that as it may, we're all, as Amber said, we need to educate people and our partners on how they can help and push in. So in today's vote by mail world, one of the nice, I guess, factoids that came from Don Nichols, someone else in the post office and touched on a little bit as well by Amber, is traditional in elections, midterm this last year was 50%. Of registered voters actually voted, and there's usually a 15% uptick. So as talked earlier, if 65% of people registered, and there are 200 roughly million registered voters, want to vote, there's going to be a lot of stress in the system on how to best service them with vote by mail technology. Let's go a little deeper, not too deep. If we go too deep, I have others who I can call on. But most ballot systems prefer to either use a non-unique ballot, which is the prime document that then becomes unique based on a file-based lookup and gets assigned to the ultimate voter, or a unique ballot that begins in the beginning to drive the process. Both workflows, whosever system, you're going to demand piece level tracking and accountability. And when I think about the envelopes that go around the vote by mail process, my quick way of visualizing it, not everyone uses 3 envelopes, but I like to think of it like a Russian doll set. You know, the oath envelope might be a number 10. The reply envelope going back to the precinct that the oath envelope goes into might be a number 11, like a 4.5 by 10 3/8, or the outer envelope might be a number 12. And that works well if something is, you know, being double parallel fold or letter fold. Some who look at maybe half fold will look at something more in the 6 by 9 range. I would just urge a little caution. Everyone knows the USPS, if you go higher in height than 6 1/8, you end up leaving the letter rate and going to flats. So most systems that we've been working with are familiar and work okay. Kind of have a 6 1/8 by 9.5 as the max. Obviously you can go to a 6.5, 9.5. Everybody's system can accommodate. Well, a lot of us like ours will go up to a 9 by 12. You're not going to do a 9 by 12 unless you're in Japan. But those are kind of the 3 popular sizes. Here's a quick overview of an intelligent vote by mail or even intelligent direct mail inserting machine. You can't see my cursor probably, but the front end not shown is maybe there's a cut sheet channel or roll in feed channel. We're just showing it where the pockets, there are basically 5 feeders on this with the cameras. Everything's check, check, check. This has an elevated base so that there's one more feeder that can supply a business reply envelope or a oath envelope that can have very discreet, unique printing done to it that will line up with the ballot, and then it'll line up with the voter. And then that all gets commingled, makes a 90-degree turn. If there are oopses, the package is diverted. Everything has double detects. We can go through a turnover belt or run straight through, so that then there's a secondary read and print that will print on that outer envelope. Or some people like to go through an open window. And by doing that, you go through the open window, and now you print the reply envelope or the oath envelope. And then you see the two red, I'm up in the upper level, two red cameras to read from above and below with the reading divert unit, which is one more double check. Plus we have a Keyence laser thickness checker. So it's not just a double detect, it's also thickness. And then if there's still a problem, it's diverted, then out on an on-edge conveyor. Long-winded way of saying everybody who's building successful systems has multiple steps of safety, but it all comes down to data. To get in a vote by mail, just like getting into high-end commercial inserting, you don't want to get your largest donor getting two potential offers. So good data in, good data out, can't be stressed enough, as Rick has stated too. So I'm going to close. I believe this package is going to be good for everybody. I think they'll get a copy. And since I had 10 minutes allowed, I just have a 2-minute video to show, because I think it can illustrate what can be done with cameras and integrity better than my explaining it. So this is just a 2-minute video. And if I do this right, I don't have to talk. Here we go. I may talk a little bit. So here you see a series of feeders, and we're going to compensate if there's a misfeed out of the first feeder. And the reason I'm showing this is actually, we'll get to the end where there's a good video. It's kind of animated, and I think it'll answer a lot of people's questions without my having to get in the weeds. What's very nice about this is the machine is self-correcting itself. It's not dependent on an operator opening up covers or trying to move pieces. And when a piece is diverted like that because it doesn't meet requirements, notice how the seal flap is not stuck shut. And now, whether it's Bluecrest or others, us in particular, I think this is a good illustration of how, with auto mismatch recovery, we're going to keep things in sequence. So the missing IDs, whether it's the IMB or a 2D code, we sense it's wrong, and we'll make the correction. And no one ever gets anything out of sequence, right? There's no way when you grab one set and you put another set that something goes out of sequence, but we will catch it if it does. So now let's say the camera can't read. Or again, now it's out of sequence with the primary document. This is what I meant by can't read it. Something's wrong. And we're almost there. Okay, so again, it's a real thrill to be able to participate today. I know there'll be more chats offline, and any way I can help and WD can help, please let us know.
Thanks, Brooke. So let's pause here because I think Brooke and Rick were talking a lot about the outbound process, and I think Laurie's going to talk a little bit about the inbound. So if I can maybe ask a couple of questions that have come in. I guess one of the questions has been, we talk about high integrity mailers that are going to be most likely to, try to convert and try to add capacity. Rick, starting with you, I mean, how would you kind of prioritize and itemize what a minimum threshold would be if you're not currently doing ballot mail, what you would need to have in place in order to really consider it? From the technology standpoint, we've talked about being HIPAA compliant, SOC 2 certified. Rick, if you want to take a stab at that first, and then Brooke, you can weigh in.
Yeah, so let me just jump in at a high level. When it comes down to integrity, it's about the ballot that is being created and produced, right? So Blue Crest starts from an end to end, which means that we start at the printing cycle, print to roll, print to cut sheet. And essentially what we have is various identifiers that are part of the overall print. So by the time that we get, into the inserting product, everything is traced all the way through and through. If it finds through our quality verification of the overall process that there is some type of issue, and essentially we're able to make sure that we highlight what that issue is and get something, reprinted or redone as necessary for the overall equipment. The overall chain, right? If you look at the chain of custody throughout the entire process, we talk integrity as step by step, but then we also talk about the tracking, right? And when it comes down to tracking, is ensuring that you're going to be able to produce that intelligent mail barcode on every single one of those items. Those were, that was one of the things that has been highlighted by the United States Postal Service, is that it's very important to make sure that that information is correct when inducting into the post office. So again, chain of custody, integrity, tracking, but it doesn't stop there, right? Because Blue Crest not only provides the outgoing portion of it, but it's equally important to understand, to indicate to the mail service, print and service providers here, make sure that they understand is it doesn't stop there, right? That's the outgoing portion of creating the ballot. Once you create the ballot, all of those have to be returned to get processed by the counties, right? At the incoming portion of it. The incoming portion of it, essentially, we need to make sure that all of the information is going to be valid, right? That you're going to be able to process through the entire stream, that you have things that are equally important, such as 3 of 9 or 2 of 5 identifications that are a part of the return envelope. Why? Because that does the call up to be able to do auto signature verification for those state and counties that want to do that, right? So all of this through the entire chain of custody is equally important, right? So I'll pause there, Taylor.
Yeah, and I would just add, as Rick did, the ability to handle file-based inserting is extra critical. And the camera and the fail safes, if there were something to go wrong, that it's not discovered by the voter, because that will just give this industry a very bad name. And I think having someone who's very smart and good at handling data, which most people are, if they're handling high-end direct mail, marketing mail, for-profit and not-for-profit, you guys are already data experts. So that's a legitimate leg up.
What kind of facility protocols need to be in place? Chain of custody type of protocols that you're seeing exist within your typical ballot mailer printer? And I guess Brooke, why don't I start with you if you can take a stab at that first?
Well, again, if you're familiar with HIPAA and SOX and you're already a high-end commercial printer mailer, and you got it, data is sacred. You cannot leak. There can't be a problem with the voter mail list. You've got to be able to handle data the correct way. Rick might well be able to go deeper into the weeds on this than I can, but if this is all new to you, I would be hesitant or find the experts that will help you. We have software process workflow experts that can talk offline. But if from my old world of being a traditional envelope person, this would make me very scared, but it's something that W&D embraces heavily because we know how to help you manage it and execute.
Right. Rick?
So from print and mail service providers, this is actually a fantastic segue there into what we call the vote by mail management system that Lori's going to be talking a little bit more about. It's critically important that, if you have not done this before, that you become informed. There's a wealth of resources that are out there from the United States Postal Service, as well as, the Vote at Home Institute, the EAC as well. And so all of these different facets provide some level of perspective. The USPS has done a fantastic job with the 2020 official election guide, which is called the KIT 600. For those who are not familiar with it, that is a great opportunity to learn a lot more, starting with the design of ballots. As folks are looking to get into it, it gives some level of guidance and understanding of what some of those criticalities are. Why? Because you're going to be inducting into the United States Postal Service. And if you are, you still have to meet certain DMM requirements or guidelines regulatory as it relates to USPS, right? But a perfect segue, Thoyer. I don't want to.
Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead into that. And then we got a few more questions that I think we'll queue up here at the end.
Super.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead, Lori.
Oh, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. This is a pretty exciting time for the mailing industry. And one of the things is I hear a lot of fear and doubt. People are a little worried about getting into this. Is I have great news is that we have been doing this for a long time. And when Blue Crest sets up a county, they typically don't have a lot of experience in this area as well. So since we've been doing it for a while, we've kind of set up some systems in a box to help roll it out. There'll be some videos that you can see where there's a system in a box that was set up in Orange County that included a printer, an inserter, and the sorter with all the software. And what we've designed at Blue Crest is being able to bring a mailer in whatever point you need. So if you need help on the front end with the ballot preparation work, with the PDFs, with the voter registration files, we've already built a system that takes the voter registration files and creates mail run data files automatically with software that we've been using to do something like this for a long time. We've just specialized it all into the ballot. When it comes to the ballot assembly and mailing, we're very familiar with setting, we work with printers, we sell printers. So we've already worked with the printers to be able to send files directly to the printers, create automatic reprint files, indexing files, so that if anything is discarded on the inserter, it's able to be reprinted and tracked. The ballots are then inserted using a mail run data file that was pre-created with this ballot prep work that's available from Blue Crest. Ballots are then delivered to the post office. We are tracking everything. We've been talking a lot about IMBs. A great part about this ballot prep work is that we're working with one of the larger, with gray hair, to be able to create the IMBs ahead of time. So the IMBs are already pre-created for the outgoing and the incoming package that'll already work with a vote by mail system so that all that information is reported in. And then really it's all about reporting. And I don't care if you're running any type of operation, it comes down to reporting. Being able to report back what happened with on a piece level, what happened with every ballot, being able to report that you're on time and there's nothing going wrong in the operation, being able to report that it was delivered, being able to report that that ballot was returned. Now, some of the things you want to start to think about. So you're a high integrity mailer and you have Blue Crest and friends like WD saying, we can help you get into this. We know how to do a high integrity work. Well, what are the things you have to think about? First of all, there are super tight SLAs on this. There has to be, how it was explained to me is an E-30 or an E-45. The first week that the ballots are ready, it has to go to public viewing to make sure that they're readable, understandable, and that the public is happy with it. So with that E30, your first week is already shot in a QC process. Then you start to figure out, all right, how fast do I have to print? And then the hard part is how fast do I have to insert and get it into the mail stream? Typically, we're working with printers and we're starting to recommend variable printing when it comes to the print. Some of the things that you're going to find are a lot of these counties have different precincts as well as different parties. And unique ballots are printed by precinct. So setting up systems where you can variable print on the fly and then insert directly into the inserter seems to be one of the best practices that we're finding out there. Other things that start to think about and things that we're recommending are these envelopes. So as a group, as we start to gather the industry leaders and we can talk to the federal government and say, if we want to make recommendations, we want to make sure there's a lot of these type of envelopes in the market so that if what everyone's explaining, so if we suddenly have 170 million people wanting to vote, we're not trying to figure out how to get 170 million uniquely designed envelopes on the fly. We have to set this up where we can succeed. What happens after you print? There's typically two different workflows. There's an offline workflow and an inline workflow. And this is where people need to start to think about labor as well as social distancing and getting the work through the operation quickly. So offline workflow, you're going to print the ballot. One of the things that starts to separate whether you're going to do fold offline or fold inline is the length of the ballot. So most of the inserting systems can do 14 inches length pretty easily. With retrofits, a lot of the inserting systems can do up to 17 inches. But what we find are a lot of the counties want 20 inches. But when you're into 19, 20 inches, you have to fold out offline and match on the inserter. Now I was asking these, why would you want a 20 inch? Let's just do 14 inches. The reason they like the longer ones is on the tabulation process. So when you think about the back end of this whole thing, all of the envelopes getting back to the election agency, and then it's election day, and they're all sitting there. Well, one sheet versus two sheets makes a difference in sub-tabulation equipment. Just like with our equipment, it doubles the time it takes to process. And they need to be able to get the election results out as quick as possible. So it's always working with the counties to maximize all the equipment usages. And you can really see, you know, if you're doing an offline, you have a lot of extra steps. You're doing feeder to feeder matching. And what was great was with WD, they showed you what you have to do when you have an error, when you have a mismatch, and how many pieces get diverted out of the system. And then all of those pieces have to be reprinted. They have to be tracked, and you have to make sure that when you reprint them, you didn't do anything different with the IMB. The other workflow is to do everything inline. That's print your ballots inline variably, bring it into the inserter, put what, you know, we can add how many other insert feeders for additional information. We'll get into that. Print directly on the inserter. So the ballot reply envelope, or I hear it called the, there was another word I was heard used earlier, but it promises that you signed it. I forgot the other word for that envelope, but it promises that you signed it. It's an agreement. You sign this and you promise this is your signature. And that can be, that envelope can be created on the inserter, as well as the outer envelope can be created on the inserter. And what this does is it takes all of your work cells and it brings it into one system. And then you start to think about how many people need to run this system. Since it's automated and you're bringing it in with a roll, you can run this with one person, maybe a person behind it that helps fill. But we're starting to think about how do you socially distance on the inserter? How do you make sure that everything you're building can maximize labor and maximize workflow? The other thing that you want to start to think, so this talks about the ballot reply envelope, or the, that word I can't seem to think of, the ballot return envelope. These can be created in several ways. The Civil Liberties Group created some great samples that meet a lot of the election official needs. I don't have that sample. It has multiple places where there's variable information. That variable information that's on that reply envelope can be printed on the inserter, or as I said, matched if you print it offline. These three different areas are typically what the inbound sorter starts to look for. And these are the pieces that we start to track all the time to make sure that we have end-to-end tracking. So some other things we want the printers to be able to think about, or printing and inserting companies to think about, is this just isn't a one-time opportunity. So first of all, a lot of times when ballots are being sent out, they send sample ballots out ahead of time so that the voters can familiarize themselves with that. So that's additional print and inserting that needs to be completed. There's additional information that typically goes into these. Oops, I thought I had a picture of it. Additional information that typically goes into these. So in those insert feeders, they have instructions. Those need to be printed. What we found in Pennsylvania and Ohio, just within the last 30 days, they ended up sending postcards to every registered voter asking them to sign up to be able to cast their vote by mail. So it's not just this election mail that's in play here. There's a lot of mail that happens on the front end and on the back end that'll keep the printers busy if they decide to get into this opportunity. I want to talk a little bit about the inbound sorting process. Now, this has nothing to do with the printers. The print inserters, we will never recommend that you do the inbound processing. I don't believe we'll ever recommend it, at least at this point we don't. They want a closed loop process. And they actually have people that stand there and witness this process from both parties. So there's usually like a viewing area where there's people viewing the inbound sorting of these. What happens with this system is not only does it sort to zip code like we're all accustomed to seeing sorters do, but on that reply envelope or that ballot reply envelope, there's typically a signature. And what this system does is it takes the signature that's in the voter registration file and it matches it to the signature that's on the envelope. And if those signature match, it sends it down into the sorter. It opens up the top, it sends it down to the sorter, and it sends it into the proper tray, typically based on precinct. If it doesn't match, the workflow is sent to a station where somebody can manually go through it and decide if it's something that, that will work or if it needs to be audited. But those are processes that the counties will set up. Right now, I'm working with a county in Pennsylvania that has to set up a manual workstation that suddenly is going to get in, because we can't get them a sorter out fast enough. They're going to have to sort in a couple 100,000 pieces by hand, scan each one of them, check the signatures to see if they match, and then put them into a tray to be able to get ready to open and tabulate on election day. All of this performs a closed loop as well. That IMB that we printed on that reply envelope, that ballot reply envelope on the very beginning, that's also checked here at the sorter. So we then send the county a file saying we saw this ballot went out, it went out with this IMB and we can confirm it. It went out with this confirmation number and we can confirm it. And now this ballot is in, we can confirm that the address or the signature is correct, and we can confirm that that number is correct. That file is then sent to the election officials, and then they display it so that every citizen can see their ballot. They can see that their ballot was received, they can see that their ballot was sent back, and we're also building informed delivery into the loop so that they'll be able, we want to make sure that they can see it through informed delivery and have ideas like using informed delivery with a Pearl so that they have instructions on fill out the ballot in a digital way as well, marrying digital and physical, which all of us as mailers know works best. This kind of goes through that inbound sorting process. We can do phased in approaches. So I had one county that they didn't have the signatures on the outside of the envelope because they didn't even believe that that was something that was possible. They were amazed. So now we're working with them to redesign their envelopes for that signature. But the first time, the first pass through, we were just going to scan the barcode so that we can report that file out to the election counties and to the citizens. Now, data tracking. Data is critical in this whole story. We're able to bring the data and show the election officials when it was delivered, if it wasn't delivered, why it wasn't delivered. So we hear about voter fraud and we hear about people getting ballots that may have passed away or that are deceased. A lot of the problems that they say could happen with voter fraud. We're going to be able to supply reports back that shows everything that happened with that ballot as it was delivered, and if it was returned, why it was returned, so the election officials can make an intelligent decision about that ballot. We could also show as the ballots are coming back in. So say somebody is starting to hire labor to be able to manage the ballots coming back in. Anybody that's familiar with IMB knows that we can track it as it's going out, but we can track everything coming back in so that we can adjust labor from a wider view as well. Tracking IMB, I think I got that one. And that's it for me. So I can turn it over for some questions there.
Great, Laurie. Let me just answer. There's one question that's been asked several times by our audience. We'll get to this, and then I'd like to get to our Dan from the USPS because they're also a critical partner, and then we can open up to all the panel. But a question that's come through multiple times really is from the technology side. How quickly are the manufacturers and the technology providers able to get and deploy new technology out if ordered?
Well, what's
so,
great, I can answer that. So what's great, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Nothing. Yeah, you and Brooke and Rick, if you guys want to answer that, that'd be great.
Sure. So what's great is at Blue Crest, we're accustomed to putting a lot of equipment out, especially end of quarters. I mean, anyone that's worked with us in the December, January timeframe, typically we know that there's a lot of equipment that has to go out and get set up quickly. So this is something that we're an expert at. What we need are orders. It's tough to pre-build a bunch of equipment and hope that you guys are going to order or hope that someone's going to order. So we need to start, and we're working with the election officials real well now. So we're getting a lot of election officials calling in to get their inbound sorting equipment set up. But I'm very concerned about the ballot equipment and making sure that we have enough of the right ballot equipment out there. So it is going to be as fast as you can call your rep on the Blue Crest side, and we can get equipment out to you.
Yeah, so let me just finish that thought process related to Blue Crest. So Blue Crest are American-made print, insert, and sort products, right? So we started a call to action, to Lori's point. We started a call to action early on. So we did actually start doing pre-bills of equipment. So we do have some that are available, and they are going very, very rapidly. So really depends on your needs and what you want to process, how you want to process. You know, a lot of, you know, technical questions also come about in terms of delivery. I mean, we're here for you to support you for quick delivery, but to answer the question a little bit more pointed, we've been delivering as quickly as 5 to 6 weeks. We just received an order actually on Monday morning, and we will be delivering it in June. It's in process already, and it's just a matter of finalization of configurations. So again, just want to make sure that folks know the time is now. And if you want to order material and you want to be able to produce and utilize it rather quickly, then the time is now. Please feel free to give us a call. Okay, so
One more piece, Rick, too. The software is very easy to deploy. So you don't have to be overly concerned about the software. If you need software on the front end to create mail run data files and create those IMBs with the voter registration files, that's a very easy piece to drop in as well.
Yeah, and Thayer, I think our answer is somewhat similar. Those already with our systems, you know, software upgrades can move very quickly. Given the nature, we recently sold, you know, I think it's now 16. When I did the slide, it was 15. You know, complete high-end systems, but we welcome that opportunity to have a conversation. But it's very interesting. You know, we're already talking August, September, and so we encourage the calls.
Great, thanks. All right, so if everyone can mute except for Dan, because we're having it looks like a couple audio issues here. So Dan is an election specialist from the U.S. Postal Service. And so, Dan, you are up to talk about the important role that the Postal Service plays in election ballot mail.
Thank you, Thayer. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists as well. A lot of great information was shared already on this conference. Thayer, can you give me a high sign that you can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, great. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to present today. A lot of great information that's already been shared. The Postal Service, you know, our commitment to the democratic process is, you know, we're steadfast about this. We're very proud about what we do. We're very proud to serve the election community. And the election community is not only the federal, state, and local election officials. You know, it's an entire environment, an entire system that works very well together. The Postal Service, again, you know, we're committed to working with the state and local election officials to ensure the smooth processing of mail. we have a very robust proactive outreach process that we facilitate during election cycles. We reach out, we talk to all the secretaries of state, we talk to all the state election directors. Additionally, we're reaching out to about 9,000 local jurisdictions. I believe that, you know, Amber was making the point earlier about Michigan and Wisconsin. You know, they're significant because they have a high saturation of election jurisdictions. Every township is its own jurisdiction. And, you know, of course, there's varying degrees of understanding and capabilities within these jurisdictions. For us, it's, you know, understanding how we're working with all of the various state and local jurisdictions and where they're at in their processes. Obviously, it's a complex business. You know, I took some notes along the way here. For us, it's, you know, it's about, you know, federal, state, and local statutes. For the Postal Service, it's about our standards and our regulations. And then, of course, you know, we're all here to support one another through this process. And, you know, what we want to do, and if I could, you know, just have you walk away with a couple of key points today, is I'm going to talk briefly about the opportunity. On this slide, I've got that, you know, in 2018, there were about 283 million pieces of outbound election mail and about 2.6 billion pieces of political mail that was delivered. You know, as we've indicated in this, our current realities with COVID-19, many jurisdictions are enhancing or, you know, broadening their use of absentee balloting. There's about 20 states that require excuses today, and they're probably, from a voting perspective, they're probably in the sub 5% of all ballots cast are by mail. Many of these jurisdictions are looking through executive orders and administrative actions, et cetera, to, you know, modify those specifically for the primaries, and in some cases extending into the November election cycle. So there's going to be a tremendous opportunity on a go-forward basis. Something that, you know, I love this quote. Tammy Patrick and I, she's with Democracy Fund. We've worked collaboratively for about 10 years now. And she just happened to say this recently, and I wrote it down, and we both started using it as a quote. Tens of millions of American voters have their ballots handed to them by their USPS postal carrier, not a poll worker. That's significant because, you know, this just illustrates the point that, you know, in this current COVID reality, the majority of the democratic process this year, we're looking at it, you know, falling to the mail side. So again, that goes to the opportunity. You know, and there's varying degrees of understanding, you know, with about 9,000 jurisdictions that, you know, we're out conversing with during the election cycle with our various teams, you know, there's a high degree of variation. I think that was probably accentuated earlier with my co-panelists. There are some jurisdictions that are, you know, doing a lot of manual processing. In some instances, they're, you know, affixing postage stamps to their envelopes, and where, you know, current state regulations may be changing to support prepaid postage options. Some small jurisdictions may, in fact, be, you know, affixing stamps. You know, we know what the best practices are. They've been discussed on this call, you know, from a ballot mail visibility perspective. You know, we're all about high quality mail piece design and visibility. If you can support us, you know, in those efforts and, you know, communicating that and doing the necessary educational activities for the boards of election that you're speaking with, in some instances, you know, you may be the first person other than a postal employee that's coming to them offering to support them. Again, it was mentioned earlier on the call that, you know, in 2020, through the CARES Act and through some other Stafford funding, there's funds available to these state and local jurisdictions to, step up and take advantage of professional mail preparers that can help them get to that higher level of mail piece design and quality. We, from a Postal Service perspective, I'm interested in producing mail piece designs that not only comply with our mailing standards, but are also highly automation compatible. We don't want to get into instances where we're scaling mistakes or potential for mistakes. In some instances, there's mail pieces that actually do comply with our requirements, but ultimately the voter can be confused. We recently had a mass mailing of a state where Amber had alluded to them. They had mailed out about 6.5 million absentee ballot requests as a trifold mail piece, and that was, fine. The risk, however, was that on the return side of the mail piece, they had to fold the mail piece in on itself and tape it to return it. And there was a very high incidence of, the voters that were returning these absentee ballot requests. They did it incorrectly. They folded it the same way they received it. So naturally, they received them back in their mailbox, and there was a little bit of confusion there. We had to do a lot of manual processing to get through that. But there is a significant opportunity. Again, this slide illustrates that there's just over 10,000 election jurisdictions. We have, again, teams of folks in the Postal Service. We're out educating them during the election cycle. And again, it's a significant opportunity. But again, something I wanted to go back to as I was just looking at a note, it's that business of statutes. 50 states, there are 50 different ways to do this. They all have different timelines, and that has to be something that everybody's cognizant of. I think Lori just talked about timelines and, the urgency that these state election executives are bringing to bear on this. But it's just not the absentee ballots. Lori touched on it. There's, voter communications pieces. There's registration mailings. There's absentee ballot requests. There's some sample ballots that go out sometimes in advance of the absentee ballots themselves. So it's just not that one piece. There's generally several pieces of election mail where the boards of election are communicating with their base voters. Here's a slide that plainly illustrates. It's an eye chart for some, but I'll leave the presentation and Thayer can share that out. But what's important to note here is that voting by mail in 2016 represented about 24.1%. We had a lift in 25 to 25.8 in 2018. We've got many experts that are saying that they're looking for a doubling plus, which supports what Amber was saying earlier, that we could be looking at 50% plus this year for absentee ballots. And again, it's just not the ballots. There's a lot of registration and absentee ballot mail pieces that need to go out in advance. Tracking to some of the COVID-19 changes, again, this is a great slide from a visual perspective. All mail elections, Amber talked about this, Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and Hawaii for 2020. No excuse absentee voting, those typically have a little bit higher understanding of mail use. The excuse required for absentee voting, those are a little bit more challenging. Again, they tend to have lower mail volume, so as they're changing their legislation and their administrative rules to support expanding absentee ballot use this year, there's going to be some significant lift. And then, of course, these states that are in green and tan, they've already made some movement in this new COVID-19 environment to shift some of their legislation to be more supportive of expanding absentee balloting. This is just a quick slide to illustrate the differences between election and political mail. I'm sure everyone on this call is aware. This is just a presentation that I had already handy. Again, election mail ballots can be tendered with the tag 191. That's that bright green tag on the left-hand side of the slide. Essentially, that improves visibility as mail is first inducted into the plants. we have a certification process that mail is essentially logged in hand from one function to another function before it goes out into deep processing. So it's something that, you know, here are examples. You have mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, ballot materials, etc. There's a lot of mail volume that goes with election mail, and the likelihood is going into the November election cycle, states are going to continue to expand that absentee ballot franchise for voters. Again, I think we've talked about this a little bit. Absentee ballot, it's, you know, typically mailed in advance of an election by a voter who is unable to be present at the polls. Again, they're relaxing the rules during this new COVID environment so that more people will be able to avail themselves of, you know, voting by mail. Vote by mail states, as we know, those people, the voters in those states are on basically permanent voting rolls when they register. So for each election cycle, they automatically get a ballot by mail. They don't have to request it. And of course, the official election mail logo, that's another one of those visual indicators that, you know, lets voters know that this is an official document. What I wanted to highlight on this slide for the Postal Service and the military, you have to be aware that there are thousands of jurisdictions across the country. Many of these jurisdictions have uniformed Overseas Citizens Voting Act eligible voters. Those would be in the military and the diplomatic services, as well as citizens living abroad. If they are registered to vote, we are, you know, the boards of election are required to mail them ballots, and typically all the ballot materials leading up to the absentee ballot. The ballot itself has to go at least 45 days prior to the November 3rd, 20 election date. So again, as you're building out your calendars, just be mindful that if you're, you know, involved in the ballot process, you're always tracking to the military ballots, because those will be the ones that are going out the door first. The label 11DOD is illustrated at the top. That's available to the APO and FPO voters only, as those are coming back into the military. Military does the transport back to our Chicago International Service Center. When it hits the domestic mail stream, it's treated as express mail. Some additional highlights. We've already talked about the tens of thousands of elections that'll be coming up. Of course, we have President and Vice President. There's 35 Senate seats plus 2 specials this cycle. Of course, from a House perspective, every 2 years, all 435 House seats are up for re-election, plus 4 special elections this year, and we have 11 governor's races, plus which all of the local elections that are coming up. So there's a lot of opportunity here. From a Postal Service operational focus, we're conducting an extensive outreach process. We have issue reporting and resolution. Boards of election are aware that if they have any issues, they can be reported through electionmail.org, and that integrates into one of our ticketing systems. We also implement daily all clear of ballots at all post offices and plants from now through December. So if we're identifying ballots in process, we're getting those moving. Some frequently reported issues on our side: misdelivered return ballots due to mail piece design. Again, mail piece design for us is critical. If we get that right up front, then we typically, the only other issues that we may have on the back end are timing related, where some jurisdictions allow for the request of absentee ballots, in some instances the Monday before a Tuesday election. That's problematic for us only because it doesn't comply with our delivery standards. Of course, we have postmarking issues as well. Some non-automation compatible return ballots are required for manual processing. You know, that's a challenge, and sometimes facial identification marks are obscured. all too often voters think that's where they affix stamp. So the Postal Service doesn't call any joy on those, because we sometimes in the orientation process will return those back to the voters. It all depends on how busy return envelopes are. And then, of course, we've got late delivery. Please make everyone aware that our delivery standards. We deliver most first-class mail within 2 to 5 days. We deliver most marketing mail within 3 to 10. Also attributable to late delivery are envelope design flaws and inaccurate addresses. Mail piece location. Mail pieces without IMB. It's already been widely discussed on this call. Intelligent mail barcodes are a key to tracking and data. It's all roads lead to data equals success for us, because it helps us track the ballots in the mail stream. When there's local arrangements, local mail holdout bypasses plant scanning processes. We don't like what we consider sweetheart deals, where local post offices hold mail to deliver directly to the Board of Election, which is probably down the street in town. That bypasses all of the goodness of the intelligent mail barcodes, because we don't scan pieces at local post offices. We only do that at plants. Mail preparation, mail service providers, again, some are producing pieces without intelligent mail barcode. It's highly recommended. We do realize it's optional, but we do highly recommend it. Again, we've already talked about absentee ballots being requested right up to Election Day, ballots not being identified when inducted. That's problematic. Within our paper postage statements, as well as all of our e-doc options, there is a checkbox in there. Please check that it is election mail. It gives us that higher degree of induction visibility. We've created service type identifiers for ballot mail. There's 23 new STIDs for outbound mail and 3 for return. And we always ask that mailers avail themselves of our informed visibility product. Best practices, again, essentially what we want to do is, leverage everything that was already discussed. We have a lot of great information in Pub 632, which is part of our Kit 600. Use automation compatible letter size reply envelopes. Boards of election, we always encourage them to use first class mail to get that higher delivery standard. And we've already talked about the goodness of the official election mail logo. I'm not going to go through each of these bullet checklist items, but this is for you. Again, I'll leave the presentation with Thayer and he can share it out. Essentially, these are top of mind, critical path elements and, things that we should check off to make sure that we are successful in preparing all of the mail and inducting the mail. Election community. Yes.
Hey, Dan, this is Thayer. We're about at time, so if you don't mind, just maybe wrapping up, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I can end off on this. Election community partnership, essentially what we want to do is just make sure that we're partnering with all of our print vendors as well as all of our state and local executives.
Fantastic, Dan. And I did want to make sure we get one question answered by you, and that is, with all the country suspensions on receiving mail from the United States right now, how could that impact ballots being sent overseas if those suspensions are still in place?
Yes, that's a very important topic. Well, first let me say that for those that would like to track that, they can sign up for our industry alerts. I don't have a link in my presentation. Maybe I can add that there and send that along to you. Essentially, industry alerts let the entire community know what domestic and international service disruptions exist. I think as of the other day, there were 100 countries that were not receiving mail from the United States. That's out of approximately 292 countries that we have relationships with, which is pretty much the entire globe. To answer your question directly, the situation is incredibly fluid. We're looking at every opportunity to stand up and support bidirectional mail capacity with every country that has been affected by these outages. From an election, from a Board of Election perspective, if the voters have filled out their federal postcard application and they've indicated mail, which is the default option, then a mail piece must be sent to them. The Postal Service, if we are unable to deliver that mail piece, will identify that quickly and will return it to sender with reason code. If boards of election have a known good email address or method of contact for the voter, they can reach out to them and perhaps change the registration materials to a digital component, because it's really all about enfranchising voters in any method possible. Of course, the Postal Service is interested in supporting mail, and it's something that, again, we're steadfast in that commitment. But there are digital alternatives for the majority of outbound ballots with known good email addresses. There are about 20 states that do not allow for the return of a digital ballot being through fax or through email.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So I just want to wrap up here. If we could just do a sort of a rapid fire, quick, 10-second each. If you're looking to get into this space, what is the number one recommendation you would make to someone that is interested in doing ballot mail that hasn't done it before? And let me start with Brooke. Go ahead. 10 seconds.
10 seconds. 913-563-8718. Give me a call. We'll set you up with the experts, and you're probably further ahead than you think.
Great. Rick, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, so let me start off by saying thank you to you, Thayer, and AP Tech and all the panelists. Real quick, I mean, the bottom line is this: there's subject matter experts out there that can help you. We're able to, utilize us as a consultant, right? If you guys want to understand a little bit more about vote by mail, we've been in this day in, day out with state and election officials. Blue Crest has American-made products. We have pre-built systems that we can provide you with some type of solution. We even have combination applications that can be utilized as well in the print, insert, and sort space, right? So what's critically important is understand what it takes to be able to produce, de-risk yourself, and utilize us as consultants. So reach out to Blue Crest. We're happy to work with you. Okay.
And this is Lori. I do have, so we're hoping to grab a group of mailers, and there's going to be a survey that's going to come out that's going to represent the mail industry to the federal government and the administration. So what I suspect is that at some point, this is going to be looked at of what we have to do and where capacity is at. And what I'm hoping for is the leaders in the industry to join together so that we have answers anytime we're asked. And it's coming from a group of large, medium, small, high integrity mailers. And I would ask you to contact Thayer and to fill out your survey. And if you would like to be one of the leaders, that if the administration calls and as we're putting plans together, you would like to be included in that, please let Thayer know, and we'll be putting that committee together.
Great, thanks, Lori. Dan, you got any parting comments for the group? If the one thing they would really need to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Thayer. The best source of information is usps.com/election mail. At that website, you can avail yourselves of Kit 600, which is everything that we impart to state and local election officials so that they can be successful.
Great, thank you, Dan. And I would like to thank all of the panelists. I would like to thank Brooke and Dan and Laurie and Rick and Amber. My contact information direct to me is up on the screen. If you have any questions about what you heard today, if you have interest in being part of the conversation moving forward, please reach out. That's my direct email. That's my direct cell phone number. You can get a hold of me. We'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, we really want to thank you for your participation. We hope that you found today helpful as you explore this opportunity. And we hope you all have a great rest of the week and stay very safe and very healthy. Thank you all very much.